Live in the studio now is the Minister for Indigenous Australians, Burney. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.
We heard in Andrew's report there, the Prime Minister still optimistic that the Australian people will vote yes. We've seen recent polling numbers that have softened. You also, in a speech during the week, said, are we big enough and generous enough to tell the truth? I believe the answer is yes, because I have great faith in the goodness of the Australian people. You too have that optimism. What's it based on?
Well, tomorrow is a big day in the Parliament. The Constitution Alteration Bill will move through the Senate, and then we are off and racing in a full-scale referendum campaign. And I do have great faith in the Australian people. This is about three things, really. It is certainly about an independent Aboriginal body, elected or chosen or selected, to advise the Parliament on practical measures to improve the lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Now, to improve the lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, no matter what your view, you cannot argue that things are equal in this country. And of course, it's about listening. And we know that when you have Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people involved in the decisions to address issues, you get better outcomes. And it is also, as the Prime Minister has said, a very modest request. It's an advisory body to the Parliament and to the executive government. And I know that Australians will rise to the occasion in terms of this referendum. I have so much faith in the Australian people.
Are you worried at all by that slide in the polling numbers?
Look, we always knew that this was going to be difficult. This is a marathon, it's not a sprint. We are 4 or 5 months out from the actual referendum itself. And when I think about it, Kieran, I think about people like Lowitja O'Donoghue, I think about people like Eddie Mabo, I think about people like Charles Perkins. They all had challenges. Vincent Lingiari, they all had mountains to climb, and they are all successful. This is going to be hard, but now that we have almost finished the work in the Parliament, the campaigns will kick in. And I think it's fantastic that people want to know more. It tells me that there is a thirst out there for more information on the referendum.
So the passage of the bill tomorrow at 10 a.m, which is going to put in place the referendum, that's 10 a.m. in the Senate. Does that also spark a renewed spend and commitment from the Yes campaign?
Well, the Yes campaigns are making those decisions. The role of the government is to make sure that we do our work in terms of the passage through the Parliament. And obviously, the campaigns will make their decisions. But, you know, when you think about it, what are we really saying here? We're saying we're establishing an advisory body that will give practical advice on things like health, education and housing, things that actually affect First Nations people disproportionately. And there is nothing radical in that proposal. It is a proposal that is absolutely making sense to more and more Australians every day.
And you argue, and you use that word in that answer there, that it's practical. You say it's symbolic and practical. What reassurance is there for people who might be watching this morning saying, what are the practical, the real world impact of a voice to Parliament?
Sure. Well, we saw the Closing the Gap outcomes come out this week from the Productivity Commission. 4 of the 19 Closing the Gap targets are on track. Life expectancy is not on track. Baby birth weights is not on track. Year 12 completion's not on track. These are real life issues for this country to think about. And in my mind, there is so much to be gained for all people from passing this referendum. I believe Australia is one of the best countries in the world. If we embrace the idea that we are going to recognise 65,000 years of culture and heritage and story, which is yours and mine, how proud does that make us? How grown up does that make us as a country? And in a practical way, let me give you an example, Kieran. There's a thing called the Community Development Program. It's essentially supposed to be an employment program. Dismally failing. We are going to reform that program. We're in the process of it. And a voice to the Parliament, a voice to the executive government is going to be fundamental in terms of the real life outcomes for employment, community development in Aboriginal communities. People want mechanics. People want aged care workers. People want real jobs with real conditions. And in my mind, a voice to the Parliament is fundamental in making sure we get that program correct.
It's at a time, and I know they're very different issues, but when you've got people struggling with their interest rates and feeding their kids and cost of living and so on, it's a totally separate issue, but it puts pressure on people. And I wonder, is that an issue that the campaign has got to sort of grapple with because people don't have the bandwidth to say, okay, I'm more open to a voice to Parliament?
Sure. Look, I think that's a very real point. And there is no doubt that things are pretty tough for people out there in Middle Australia. You've got interest rates, you've got food prices, petrol prices, managing families. But this is about all of us as Australians. This is a unifying moment. One of the things I find alarming is the approach of the No campaign to polarising people. This is a moment of unity, and I completely accept that there are first issues for people like cost of living, but this issue is also about making us a better country as a whole, and I think people will embrace it that way.
You spoke about, in a speech during the week, you said that the No campaign is importing American-style Trump politics, and at its heart is a post-truth approach to politics. How widespread is that within the No campaign, or are they just isolated cases?
I think it is the modus operandi of the No campaign. They are intent on sowing fear. They are intent on polarising people. 3 quick examples. They're using Bob Hawke's image to say that he doesn't support recognition. He actually did, and his widow, Blanche, contacted me during the week to say that Bob's greatest regret in public life was not advancing the cause of recognition. They're using the famous case of the man that came from Nooka. They were parading him around as if he was Vincent Lingiari's grandson. He said he wasn't, and he had a camera shoved in his face and lines to read out. And then, most famously, Shadow Minister Hastie and Shadow Minister Taylor twisting the words of ex-High Court judges French and Hayne to say that they didn't support the voice, when in fact they are absolute supporters of the voice.
You also have spoken in your role from your personal story. How does that inform the job you're doing now? If you can explain that to our viewers.
Well, I grew up in a really small country town in southwestern New South Wales, and I was raised by my great aunt and uncle, who were non-Aboriginal people, and were extraordinarily brave to take me on in their late 60s, in the late 50s, in a country town. It was a very brave act of them. But I will never forget going back to that country town in 2015. I was a cabinet minister in New South Wales, and a man said to me, 50 years later, that the day you were born was the darkest day of this town's history. And that spoke to me of racism, it spoke to me of exclusion. But the most important thing, Kieran, is that what that story represents to this country. We are a great country, and we can be greater when we embrace a voice to the Parliament.